need a reminder to say, look, we see the world the way we see it, but if we shift our attention, if we shift our perspective just a little bit, we might see something we never noticed before. And that's a part of non-obvious thinking.
Welcome to Rise and Stride, where we empower you to take your next step in an ever-changing business landscape. Here's your host, Denise Leduc-Fremming, President and CEO of the California Society of CPAs.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Rise and Stride. Today's guest is a marketer, speaker, and best-selling author, Rohit Bhargava, who's on a mission to inspire more non-obvious, and I love that, non-obvious thinking in the world. Founder of the Non-Obvious Company, he is a 3-time Wall Street Journal best-selling author of 10 books on marketing, innovation, diversity, and trends, including his #1 bestseller, Non-Obvious Megatrends. He also writes a monthly column for Inc. magazine and has been invited as a non-boring, I love that also, non-boring keynote speaker to events around the world, including our own Cal CPA Members Club Summit, where he'll be sharing his insights on July 31st. We're so excited for that, Rohit. Rohit, thank you for joining us today, for taking time. I'm really excited because I get a sneak peek and get to talk to you before you share with our hundreds of members on July 31st. So just excited to hear your insights and your inspiration for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for the invitation, and I'm really looking forward to the event. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to learn a lot. So I'm pumped for that for sure. So maybe we should get started. We always love hearing people's stories of how they got to where they are, because it's always very interesting, the journey. And I think you have a specifically interesting story to where you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I started off in the marketing and advertising industry. So most of my work, I was in the agency world. I had clients that were working in a range of different industries. And the one thing I learned from that, which I think probably relates to a lot of people who are listening, is that I would have to switch really quickly between a mindset of working on one thing versus working on something else. And sometimes between industries. I mean, in the same day, I'd work on like a campaign for toothpaste. And then later the same day, we'd be working on like a nonprofit for like FEMA and flood insurance. And so you have to bring your mind out of what you were working on into something new. And that idea of that fast switching, I think was a really useful thing I learned early on in my career. And now it's a big part of what I do because I'm dealing with so many different people and talking about non-obvious thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you, in general, how do you help others kind of frame seeing the unexpected, seeing around the corner, so to speak, because we all are so ingrained in our everyday world. And how do we step out of that and kind of look for that unexpected? We all need guidance with that.
Yeah, we are ingrained, but the thing is, it's interesting. We tend to assign a skill set to people who are able to do this, and we think, wow, they're just really good at like seeing these details or being more creative. And I sort of wish I could do that, like we think to ourselves, but I'm not that person. Like I don't come up with this crazy creative stuff every single day. And yet, if I said to you, and we were sitting in a room together, and I said, okay, I want you to only pay attention to everything in this room that's blue, all of a sudden you would focus your attention in a completely different way. And you don't need a PhD or like training on trend curation in order to do that. You just need to choose to focus on something that you weren't focusing on before. And I think that's a good analogy for what we need sometimes. We need a reminder to say, look, we see the world the way we see it, but if we shift our attention, if we shift our perspective just a little bit, we might see something we never noticed before. And that's a part of non-obvious thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting because it just takes a kind of a switch of your mind, right? To really be able to see something.
Switch and intention, right? Like you have to choose to do it.
Yeah. That's the thing that's missing sometimes, right? Because we get so ingrained in the everyday kind of routine of everything.
Well, that's why I love events like yours that it's coming up, because it gives people a moment in time when they're not in the office and they're in a different environment and says to them, this is the start of thinking differently. You're in a different place. You've chosen to be away from work today and spend your valuable time doing something different. So why not take the next step and start thinking a little bit differently about what you do? So it's perfect like to fit something like this into an event because it's already a moment in time that is disruptive for people in terms of what they typically do.
Hmm. Yeah, I always encourage people and myself when I go to events. Sometimes it's hard to unplug and you just keep doing the same thing that you do every day and answer calls. And it's really important, to your point, to take the intention to step back and to take a moment and really be able to breathe and listen and start doing something really different.
Yeah, I think that's the first step. And the second step is to not forget immediately um, what you came up with. And so, it's intention in the moment, but then it's commitment to actually do something with that new way of thinking or that new way of seeing.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. So everybody come prepared to just stop and breathe and listen. That's most important. And I think take it in, observe, absorb it as you're sitting there is really important. There was one thing that when I was reading and listening to some of your videos, and I can't wait to get your book because that I'm excited for. You had a method to kind of retrain your mind, and you called it SIFT, right? So can you talk to us a bit about that, of how we can kind of retrain the way we've been thinking for some of us more years than others? I was going to say that.
Yes. Well, the amount of time sometimes doesn't actually matter that much. But yeah, so I'm a marketing guy, which means I love acronyms. And the acronym for the method is SIFT, which the word itself has a meaning, which is to figure out what is most meaningful and sort of get rid of the rest, right? When you're sifting for gold or you're like going through a lot of noise to find the thing that has meaning. So SIFT stands for space, insight, focus, and twist. And space is finding more time, but also like mental space to have new ideas. Insight is finding something that is an interesting observation. So it's being observant leads to an insight. Focus is what to pay attention to. Get rid of the noise, get rid of the other stuff, and focus your attention. And twist is where non-obvious thinking really comes in, where it's like, now I'm going to see what no one else sees, or I'm going to come up with an idea that no one else has come up with, like that goes in maybe a different direction that is non-obvious. So that's where all the pieces come together.
Do you feel that sometimes, for me, I can help ignite different thinking sometimes if I go to a different space? So the more I can change up my environment, some of the inputs out there, the better sometimes I can shift and think differently. Is that, I mean, what you see sometimes, or what would you say could help people kind of ignite that in themselves?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. I mean, that what you just described is a great way. Shift your location, be in a different space. The other thing you can do is you can change your habits. So, one of the fascinating stories that I uncovered as I was researching the book and that I wrote about in the book was the celebrity chef Ferran Adria, who's one of the fathers of molecular gastronomy, the whole category of like food that is scientifically made, really intricate types of food. He's super creative. He was named Time Magazine's 100 Most Creative People one year. And when they interviewed him, they asked him, they said, what do you do? Like, what habits do you have to be more creative? And he said, one of the things I do every morning for a month is that I eat a different fruit every morning. And what's fascinating about that little tiny habit change is when you do something like that, you send a powerful signal to your brain that says today's not going to be like yesterday. It's going to be a little different. And that's, I think, sometimes what we need. And what you just said, which is being in a different place, that sends a similar signal. It says that we're going to do something different today. It's not the same desk, waking up at the same time, having the same morning routine. It's the opposite of a habit. It's disrupting the habit. And I think sometimes that's the key.
I love that because sometimes you think the routine it is good, right? But just doing that like signals something. That's a great story. So what can we all do like a little different, right? Do you have something you do that kind of really works to shift you into different thinking? Because you're talking about this all the time, with different individuals.
Yeah, so the nice thing is I have the space thing is not as much of a challenge for me because I have blockouts during my day. Like one of the things we were just kind of joking about before we started recording is turn off all your notifications. And I was just saying I don't have notifications. Like I don't
Oh,
work with
so
notifications.
envious of
Like
you.
right, because that's distracting. Like that means I'm doing something and now I get a notification and I got to stop that and go on to something else. And that's very disruptive to being productive. I mean, anybody will tell you that. I'm not sharing an insight nobody knows, right? But for me, the space is not really the challenge. The challenge is breaking out of the way I might be thinking about something and shifting my perspective. So for me, it's like perspective shifting. And one of my favorite ways to do that is because I travel a lot, I go to a lot of events, I'll always be in an airport. And in an airport, I'll go to the magazine newsstand and I'll pick up a magazine that's not for me. And what I mean by that is I'll pick up a magazine about something I'm not interested in at all, like sailing, for example. Like I've never really been sailing, I'm not interested in it at all, but I'll pick up that magazine and I'll buy it and I'll flip through it. And the reason I'll do it is because it puts me into someone else's perspective of their passion. And magazines are about passions. And anybody who's reading say the sailing magazine is passionate about it and they're buying products that I've never even heard of. And so the ads to the stories to the celebrities that are mentioned, like all of it gives me a different perspective of a world that I know nothing about. And that for me helps me shift my perspective. So buy a magazine that is not for you. That is an easy thing that any of us could just take $6 or $8 and do.
That's powerful. I never even thought of that, but when you think about it, it helps you have an appreciation too for others and what they do. That's good advice. All right, you've given us already so many tips. Um, I want to talk a bit about trends, right? Because we hear about trends. There's so many that, I mean, everyone talks about technology, of course, AI, the next generation. People don't have enough time, workforce being, hybrid, whatever it is today. What are some trends that are on your list? What are you watching that you think we all should be um, just focused on, or at least make sure that we're listening to see kind of what's next?
Well, the first thing I think we should all do is have a better definition for what a trend is. So I've written a lot about trends, and one of the things that I wrote early on was what I thought a trend really is. And my definition is that it's a curated observation of the accelerating present. So, curated observation is that it's something that's happening across multiple places. The curation, much like a museum curator, they kind of collect everything together and say, this is what tells a story, right? They put the pieces together and they say, here's what the story is. And they also decide what stays in the basement of the museum, right? That they don't show, which is another important aspect of curation. So when you're curating your observations, you're seeing what the patterns are between multiple stories, multiple videos, multiple things that you've seen out there, maybe multiple conversations. And the accelerating present piece is this is something that's happening right now, and it's going to, over time, this is the prediction part of it, right? Over time, it's going to matter more for more people, which means it'll shift more people's perspective. It will get more funding. It will have more companies that make more money. Sometimes it's a financial shift. And when those pieces are together, then it's what I would call a trend. And so what I'm looking at is what is shifting people's behavior. So here's one that relates to the world of professional services, CPAs or anybody in the world of professional services, right? A trend that I've been tracking for several years now that I called the human mode. And the human mode was the idea that as more technology gets available and as it replaces, in some cases, things that we used to do with people. I mean, the classic example is the self-checkout versus, somebody doing that. We have less human interaction, but we're still human and we still want it. And so what happens in that world is the cases where we do interact with a human or where we interact with a actual human professional expert become more valuable and therefore become a premium. So what the human mode says is that the most premium thing you could do is meet with someone in person. And therefore that is the highest value thing and that is the thing that we charge the most for and that people will be willing to pay the most for. And there's a perfect financial services example of this, right? If you think about the whole trend towards robo-advisory services for financial advisors, and there was a platform called Betterment that was like leading that charge, saying basically the pitch was pretty logical. Get a robo-advisory firm. There's no conflict of interest. Nobody's trying to upsell you on anything. You can just trust the robots. They're looking at the numbers and they'll tell you where to invest, which makes sense. And eventually, after a couple of years, Betterment said, oh, we're getting more customers, so let's create a premium service. And their premium service had a human advisor. So here's the robo advisory pioneer, the one saying you should only get a robo advisor, creating a premium service where they have a human advisor. And why is that? It's because we trust people. And the people who understand people always win. Like I say this in every talk. And that is something that is a beacon of hope, I think, for anybody in professional services, because what it means is you matter. Like your services matter, your expertise matters.
That's really a great observation and also helpful as I hear many students ask me, is AI going to take over the accounting world? Is my job going to be replaced? And you hear it from, to your point, financial advisors, whatever it may be. And so that's a great message out to them as far as the relationship piece. And you think about it, I mean, how, I don't know, difficult it would be to be in a world where you're just going through the checkout and you get in a Waymo and you have no interaction at all. It's very lonely, right? It's a lonely world, and so just the importance of that relationship and that understanding and communication.
Well, it also speaks to the importance of events in industries, right? Because now you can have connections with peers who are working in similar spaces that you are. And as work becomes more remote and we can do these hybrid ways of working where we don't actually go into the office all the time the way we might have in the past, these become much more important, these moments of networking and these moments of bringing people together for events. So I think that is one piece that really makes a difference. I think the other thing is when you think about the role of AI and this concern of is AI going to take my job or start doing things for me? Like think about the world of law. AI can take a contract and it can summarize it and tell you exactly what the terms of the contract is, and they can do it in 30 seconds in a way that maybe you had to hire a lawyer or legal expertise to do in the past. But what it can't tell you, or which is very difficult for it to tell you, is what's not written in the contract that should be. So it's good at summarizing what's already there because it's based on reading a lot of contracts and it's trained on that. But an actual legal expert could go through that contract and say, you know what should really be a term in this contract that's missing that you might want to add in or you might want to suggest or negotiate for? That's where the expertise comes in. So I would say there's a role for both of those things. Like maybe the legal expertise of the future isn't about reading the contract and summarizing it because it's 30 pages of really confusing stuff that no normal human could read. And so you need somebody to translate it. Maybe AI can do that. And maybe the legal counsel that you bring in is more strategic and offers the value that the AI can't.
Interesting. That it brings up another question I had because you talk about this human believability crisis, right? And I mean, you can talk more about that when we're all together. So everybody, stay tuned. But just a couple thoughts on that because I do think the trust piece is um, it's something that's needed out there, and we don't know where to get it or who to believe or what to believe. Um, and I'm going to leave it at that because there's so many places we can go with
Yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, there's a few factors that are causing this, right? And the most top of mind culprit, I think, right now is AI and AI generated fake stuff, whether it's fake media, fake images, fake videos. That gets blamed a lot for this believability crisis because, oh, everything could be fake, so we don't know what's real, so we don't trust anything. And that is a problem. But I think the other problem is manipulators of every sort who are capturing our attention. And sometimes they're in the media, sometimes they're in politics, they're in a lot of different spaces. Sometimes they're in business, they're leaders in business, and they have misled us or lied to us in some cases, and we don't always know. And that's contributing to this believability crisis as well. So when you put all those pieces together, it is a moment of crisis for believability. And I think that there are a few ways. that we can get ourselves out of it. There are ways that the industry could, get out of it. Like, for example, automated tools that can immediately detect whether an image has been manipulated by AI and tell you with a warning, right? So, or algorithms that filter out things that are fake and no longer allow them to be. So there are some industry-wide solutions that could go in place, but there's some reasons why they're not happening quite yet. The most logical one being that it impacts someone's bottom line to to do it. But I think that the things that are within our power to do, right, as individuals, and within our power as leaders to teach our people, and by the way, within our power as parents to teach our kids, is to be more media savvy about where media and stories are coming from. Look at sources for information, train ourselves on being more media literate, seeing what the telltale signs of something that has been manipulated by AI is. I mean, there's some very obvious ones, right? If you look at an image and the person has more than five fingers on a hand, that's a sign that that image is AI manipulated, right? Or the words in the background are not actual words; they're just gobbledygook, right? So there are some things that are pretty telltale signs of AI generated faked images that if you just looked a little bit harder, even on your phone, you could see it. And we have to train ourselves to do that, like to be skeptical in that way and to not share stories that we don't read. I mean, I tell people, I'm like, if you see a headline and you share the story without reading it, you're the problem. Like that's you, right? And I'm not telling you what to believe or what to like. I mean, if you read a story and you think it's great and it's a personal perspective, go ahead, share it away. But read the story. Like, don't be one of those people who just sees a headline and says, "Oh, this looks great," and just shares the story. Like that contributes to the chaos.
No, I think I mean, you said so many impactful things, but the one media literate, I think it's, we get fed so many algorithms of what we want, right? I mean, it comes and just reinforces what we think, and it's so important to get those differing perspectives and make sure you understand, like you said, the source, because how many times is the source not real or it just is coming from something that's not. So and sharing an article that you don't read, that is really good advice for a lot of people because I don't think everybody reads them.
Yeah. Yeah. If you
Yeah,
don't read it, don't share it. Like,
exactly. Take the time, right? Invest in the time.
yeah. Yeah.
That's great advice. So another, we have some time left here. So just from the perspective of the non-obvious thinking, how do you build a culture for that that helps your team members embrace and lean into that? What would be your suggestion?
Well, I think anyone who works in corporate culture work will tell you that cultures are developed based on a couple of things. One is people, the people who create the culture. There's always individuals within the company that have an outsized impact on what the culture becomes. Sometimes they're leaders by title, sometimes they're leaders by behavior, but not by title. So finding those individuals is really important to train or shift a culture. And the second piece is incentives, right? If you're incentivizing people to do the same thing they've always done, and that's the safe thing, and they're punished for not doing that, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get the same thing over and over. Whereas if you incentivize people to think more broadly, right? Here's a concrete example. Incentivize people to come up with what I like to call option C. So not option A or B, which we're often presented with, but someone who says neither of those. I actually want option C. And here's my idea for option C. And the type of person that does that, they're the hero. Like they're the ones that you should want to encourage and bring into any organization because they're the ones that signal to everyone else that we don't have to accept the way we've always done things. We can do things in a different and unusual way. And maybe it doesn't always work, but to have a culture of people who think like that, who question the assumptions, that's what most leaders want.
Option C. It's everyone think about that. What's the option C out there? Just as we're getting close to the time, I want to ask you another question on like what excites you? What excites you about the future? Because I'm not sure when you're on stage if we'll get a chance to ask that. So, what excites you about the future and what terrifies you? Let's go both sides, or at least concerns you. You don't have to go terrifies, but just from both perspectives.
Well, they're related to one another. What excites me is the number of people that I see who are doing really amazing things, whether it's in innovation or starting a nonprofit or doing a certain type of work to redefine something, like entrepreneurs and like new thinkers who have all of these amazing solutions to pretty much every problem in the world that you could imagine. That's what excites me. What terrifies me is that a lot of times they're not in charge and they don't get the attention that they deserve on any level. Funding, power in terms of being able to activate change, or media attention so that we know about their stories. And a lot of times when I get on stage and I talk about the future and I talk about it with optimism, there will be people who will listen to that talk and say, it's great that you're an optimistic guy, but are you paying attention to like the world burning out there? Like we see all these stories, like we see everything that's happening right now. And what I tell them is that, yeah, there are some negative things happening in the world, but that's what gets more attention than all these positive things that I see. And I'll give you a perfect example. Like I was just speaking at an event in Peru and they just opened a new airport in Lima, like literally 8 days before I landed there. It was brand new, which I've never been to, like a brand new airport.
You
And so
could
as
be
soon as I
excited
landed,
and nervous all
yeah,
at once.
exactly. Well, I didn't know that actually ahead of time. So it was the best of both worlds. They told me, right? Because I just flew into the airport. I assumed the airport's the airport, right? But I got on the ground and I went to the event the next day. And one of the questions that so many people were asking me was, how was the airport? Was it okay? Because we've been seeing all these stories about it being a disaster and this is happening and that's happening and all these problems, right? Because that's what all the media was. And I said the airport was perfect. It was brand new. There were lots of people helping. I got through security in record time. My bags arrived. I had no problems. If I did not know that this was a brand new airport because you told me, I would have just assumed it's a nice airport and everything's all good. So this is a perfect example, right? Because here's an entire city of people who have this brand new, beautiful airport, and all they're hearing about is the problems. And then there's an actual traveler like me who came in, who goes to airports around the world, who had a perfect experience and said, hey, it's great because I went through it myself. I didn't read any of those stories, right? They're all in the local media, which I didn't read. So I didn't know any of that stuff. All I knew was my experience, which was great. And I think that is a great metaphor for the way we often see the world. We see the world through the stories that talk about how it's burning, and we don't have that real experience of seeing something otherwise. And I'm very lucky because I go into these events and I go to these innovation labs and I talk to these entrepreneurs and I see all of the things that are happening that are positive. And part of what I feel like my job is now is to get on stage in front of these hundreds and thousands of people and say, this is what's happening that you might not see. And that's why I have optimism. And it's not based on nothing or just based on being this weirdly ignorant, optimistic guy. It's based on what I see.
It's powerful because there's so many times you hear stories and you're like, I don't know. I don't believe it. And I used to live in Chicago and people would say, how do you walk the streets? Are you afraid? How can you even go out? There's guns. I'm like, I walk all the time. I'm not afraid walking. I mean, I know where to walk, but they wouldn't even, I mean, they were afraid to even come, right? So it is those stories. And once you listen to those, it can become paralyzing and you lose hope. I think that to me is the scariest part. You lose hope in the future.
Yeah, that is scary, especially when it happens to young people. I mean, there is something around like, as you get older, you kind of get more disillusioned. I mean, that's always happened. But we've generally always lived in a world where the youth were optimistic. And there's some really uh, disturbing studies of how like people are saying, well, that's not the case. Like there's a lot of young people in America, for example, that believe that they will never have a house as nice as their parents did. And that is really concerning.
It is. So, with that, we're running out of time. I could sit here and talk to you for a long time, but we don't have all that time. But I would say, come to hear Rohit speak. You would be missing out if you did not, for sure. There's so much you can learn. And I think come be part of the movement, right? Part of the movement to spread the good stories and spread really what's happening out there and what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you have an amazing collection of speakers that I'm honored to be on the stage with. So it's going to be a great day of content and learning. And I think you'll leave energized for what comes next, which is kind of the best thing you could ask for from an event. You want to leave with new energy, with a new perspective, and maybe some real actionable advice on what to do next. And so I'm definitely going to try and deliver on that, and I can't wait to be there.
Well, we can't wait to have you and to hear the message and to engage with you. So thank you for your time today. And we will see you July 31st. We can't wait. Thank you.
Rise and Stride is produced by the California Society of Certified Public Accountants. To learn more, visit calcpa.org.